On today's show, considering what we know about the Padres now, was the AJ Preller deadline palooza of this past season actually a big mistake?
You are Locked On Padres, your daily San Diego Padres podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to an edition of Locked On Padres podcast, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day for Thursday, December 4th. As always, I'm your host with sometimes the most, Javier Reyes, and I've been covering this team for 6 years now, not just for this podcast, but also various other outlets, including justbaseball.com, chief among them. Today's episode, guys, is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. On today's show, guys, we got to talk about some fun stuff. We're doing a trade deadline retrospective. We were supposed to do some other things the everydayers know, right? We're going to do some other things, but actually we're going to do a little bit of a trade deadline retrospective. And if we have time, I'll talk about some of your comments and questions that you sent me this week. You guys send a lot of comments, and I love responding to them. But also, remember to go check out this podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Tell your friends about it. Subscribe on the YouTube. Going to be starting to use YouTube more. I'm looking to upload some more short form content on there as well. But be sure to go check that out. And leave your comments in the comment section below to be featured on next week's mailbag, especially on Monday when we basically do all mailbag, right? That's going to be a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the deadline this past year, just speaking more broadly, I think the deadline this past year was really fascinating in a lot of ways. And I think that every Padres deadline is fascinating in a lot of ways, right? This is a team that since basically you could even maybe count 2019, right? 2019, in which, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a deadline that was fun in terms of the Padres receiving things, but they did make some trades to send away things, right? Especially in the form of Javier Reyes, who everybody remembers, my brother, obviously, right? But I think that you look forward, right? 2020 is the Mike Clevenger, Mitch Moreland, spectacular. And Trevor Rosenthal, right? 2021 was the Adam Frazier disaster, unfortunately. And then I think it was Jake Marisnick was the only other move they made. 2022 was Juan freaking Soto and Josh Bell and Brandon Drury. Like absolutely insane. I still will never forget being on a work call right when that news dropped, getting the Jeff Passan notification. That was nuts. 2023 was a deadline in which they were uncharacteristically quiet. Probably the most quiet deadline they've had, honestly, when you think about it, in the last golden age, like last 6 years, I would say, right? In which all they really did was bring in Garrett Cooper, G-Man Choi, and Scott Barlow, right? Like they just did all these buy low options. And I think that was actually one of the more, not exciting, but one of the more exciting in terms of what it says about AJ Preller's ability to maybe not always go all in every single time a deadline is approaching, right? We love him, but sometimes we do wonder if he needs a little bit more restraint. And he did that. That team was choke palooza. That team, nobody showed up all year. It was super frustrating. Everyone refused to drive in runs, as we've talked about many times on this show. And then AJ Preller said, all right, I'm not giving up too much because this team clearly doesn't seem to have it. So I'll give you guys a couple pieces, but we're not going all in. That they have 2024, in which the big move they basically make is for a bunch of bullpen pieces, namely Jason Adam and then Tanner Scott, who ended up signing with the Dodgers and was shockingly not great, right? So that was an interesting thing. And then you have this past this past trade deadline. And it was a wild one, man. It was a wild one. And I think it's really interesting to look at each player and decide, was this a mistake in retrospect? Could the Padres have done something differently, right? We've talked about it before, but let's talk about first the good stuff, right? First of all, Ramon Laureano, who we talked about on the show before in terms of the player review section. We did this a couple weeks ago, looking at a lot of the lineup depth, which has been a problem for the Padres, right? And it's especially been a problem when it comes to offensive players, batters joining this team and getting a lot worse, right? 2024 is basically the main exception, with Jurickson Profar signing a mini deal and going absolutely bonanzas, and Donovan Solano having a great year, Kyle Higashioka having his best year offensively, just slugging the heck out of the ball. That was an exception. But for the most part, the Padres have struggled with guys just getting worse when they get here, right? Manny Machado being an exception, but for the most part, unless you're a super duper star, those depth pieces haven't always worked for the Padres. So it is nice that Ramon Laureano was not one of those, right? We talked about it in that episode. First 2 weeks after being acquired at the deadline, a 180 WRC plus. He was slugging the heck out of the ball, clutch performances as well. He was driving runs in. He was huge and actually might be the move that is unequivocally great that the Padres did, more so than some of the other guys that they acquired at the deadline that we're going to talk about in a second, because you also have him for this year. In 2026, right? You shored up the left field hole. Obviously, that could become a problem down the line, but the fact that they fixed it last year and they have it for this year is great, right? Ramon Laureano, after being acquired by the Padres, ended up posting an 812 OPS. It was a little bit down from what he was doing with Baltimore, where he was an 884 OPS, but that initial 2-week surge and just being an in general slugging kind of monster, he hit 9 home runs in 50 games for the Padres. He was incredible, right? His defensive value, whatever. He's not necessarily going to be the best defender. That's okay. The team has Jackson Barrell and Fernando Tatis Jr., right? A Gold Glove caliber player, and then a literal Platinum Glove player in that outfield. So that is, I think if you could argue that if they just made that one move, it would have been pretty great, right? It would have been pretty great. And then they went for Ryan O'Hearn, was the other bat that they went after. And I think that with Ryan O'Hearn, yes, you immediately see what I just talked about, which is Padres batters that get to this team and are significantly worse, right? 837 OPS in 94 games for the Orioles in 2025. And then just a 736 OPS for the Padres rest of the way. The slugging went away, right? He did hit 4 home runs in 50 games, but that's not great. He didn't hit as many doubles as you would have liked. He did not get as many extra base hits in general as you would like. He was able to still walk, right? That was great. A little bit of a lower walk rate than when he was with the Padres, but overall, he was still okay. And if that's like the worst case scenario is a thing like Ryan O'Hearn, that's not bad. And part of me actually wants to forgive Ryan O'Hearn to an extent because Mike Shildt was managing this team in such a weird way where Ryan O'Hearn was a player that absolutely should have been giving more opportunity than he actually got. Right. And it was really, really frustrating seeing Luis Arraez have a monopoly on the 2 spot. And I know that I sound like a broken record bringing this up, but it was true. In 2025, it was borderline inexcusable the way that they used him, right? He was used 4th or 5th, and I get that. But to me, he was the ideal second hitter to put behind Tatis because of the walk rate, because of the fact that he could also have a decent batting average, right? 276 versus what Arraez was putting up, which is around. Wait, what did Luis Arraez hit last year? I forgot actually. What did he hit last year? Let me see really quickly. He hit 290, right? Like that shouldn't have precluded the Padres from using him more, right? Initially after the deadline not being used as much, and it was really frustrating, right? And then they put in Ryan O'Hearn, and then yeah, he had some pretty good games for the team. He drew walks. It was great. He put together productive plate appearances. So part of me wants to put a little bit of blame on Mike Shildt and the way that they managed this team. I think he should have been the second hitter on the team. I think he should have been batting 2. I think Arraez should have been batting 4th or 5th, which is literally the best place in the lineup in his career where he's performed the best. Mike Shildt didn't seem to care. And then that was a part of it, right? But overall, still a pretty decent bat. But then you get into the interesting stuff, which is Mason Miller, and then some of the trades that maybe we have some issues with, right? In terms of not just what they gave up for Mason Miller, but also, remember Nestor Cortes? Remember JP Sears? Were these additions good for the Padres? And what does it say about AJ Preller? And did it potentially harm them in the long run? That is the question that we have to answer. But before we answer it, let me tell you really quickly about one of my favorite apps, guys. Let me tell you one of my favorite things in the world. The World Cup, first of all, is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994, and with 48 teams for the first time ever. It's going to be massive. But let's be honest, the tickets are going to be tough, man. It's going to be tough. And that's why the Game Time app is clutch. They're finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track prices dropping in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. They give you a layout, right? You can see you can compare the seat views. They literally give you a picture, right? You have the zone deals section, which is one of my favorites. You just pick a zone in the stadium. They pick the seat in that zone, and then you save big. It's really, really great. Prices are all included up front. No hidden surprise fees when you go to check out and you're like, what the heck? How did this go up by $50? I'm exaggerating, but you get my point. It's really frustrating. And in general, takes the stress out of buying tickets, guys. And as well as the guesswork. So go check that out with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account. Use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. But again, download the app, make an account, and use LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time. It's great. Go check it out. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing despite it all. on here, the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the number one sports podcast network in the business. Tell your friends about it. Tell your family about it. Tell your significant other about it. Tell your situationship about it. I don't care. Go subscribe on YouTube as well and leave some comments in the comment section to be featured on the Monday mailbag episode, or potentially be featured on my episode with Arm tomorrow. I'll try and check the comments too. If you're too late, don't worry. We're going to cover all things Padres prospects. But let's get into it. Let's continue talking. So we talked about Ryan O'Hearn and Ramon Laureano. The other big player we got to talk about, obviously, is Mason Miller. And Mason Miller with the Padres was not the problem with this trade, if there is even a problem with this trade, right? And I've seen a lot of different perspectives on this, right? But with Mason Miller, with the Padres, he was phenomenal. He pitched to with the Padres for the year, he pitched to a 2.63 ERA. He was worth 2 wins above replacement. That's insane for a reliever, by the way. Let me be very clear. That's absolutely insane. Not that I like using WAR for pitchers, but even still, if you do like it, I like bringing it up. With the Padres, he posted where is it? A 0.77 ERA. He had actually been having a little bit of a rough slide of things. He had a good FIP, 2.9 with the A's, but he had a 3.76 ERA. So he just got to the Padres and immediately was going nuts, right? 45 strikeouts in 23 and a third innings pitched. He was amazing, right? Like, there's no doubt about that. And to a degree, I like the trade, but we got to talk about what the Padres gave up. We talked about on yesterday's episode, the Jake Cronenworth potential trade that Jeff Passan brought up. And that trading Jake Cronenworth, I don't think is feasible for a couple reasons. Number one, I just don't know if you can get back the type of value for like a starting pitcher type value right now. Right. I'm going to ask Arb about this tomorrow, since he is more of a Marlins expert, talk about him with Edward Cabrera and whether or not that makes sense. But I do think that trading Cronenworth, a underrated player, I think now, especially if he's able to keep up this walk rate, be a decent hitter in the 8-hole. And who knows, second year playing defense at second base, being able to focus on the position that he should be playing rather than first, he could provide more defensive value. I wouldn't be shocked. Right. But if they were, let's say, to get rid of Jake Cronenworth, then what did I say? You have nothing. You have to go bargain bin hunting unless they have more money than we realize and they can sign a decent second base player. They do a little, switcheroo. They flip him for something, and then they bring in a second baseman. They get a starting pitcher in return for Cronenworth. Or if you hadn't traded Leody DeVries, could he have been a guy this upcoming year? I think that is almost irrelevant compared to what my main thing is, which is just the overall value for this team. Right? Because when you look at what the Padres' issues are right now, which is starting pitching and catcher, I would say are the biggest things. This is a player who had a 125 WRC plus in the minors all of last year, right? For not just Oakland, but also the Padres. In Double-A, he also did really, really well. 281, 359, 551 slash line, by the way. Like, he was slugging the heck out of the ball. He was drawing walks. He wasn't striking out too much. He looks great. And this, by the way, is a guy who's still just 18 years old. This guy could be special. Could be is the key word, though. And that is a good point to bring up, that we don't know for sure if he's going to be a star. And Mason Miller is under control through, I believe it is 2029. So I'm not hating on the trade in that respect. However, when you look at some of the issues that the Padres have right now, right, and you consider the money, you consider Leody DeVries and the value that he could have had in maybe being a trade asset for a starting pitcher, right? Knowing that you were probably going to lose Michael King and that you were definitely going to lose Dylan Cease. That's why I have this issue, right? Only because it's relief pitching, and I just don't view relief pitching nearly as highly. However, the big thing that determines whether or not the Padres made a mistake at the deadline, in my opinion, because of what I just said, the factors of what you gave up for Leody DeVries, and the fact that you're going to probably lose Michael King. I think it's like an 8% chance that he signs back with the Padres, but probably losing Michael King. You just lost Dylan Cease. Giving up an asset that you could have used to get one of those pitchers that I see some of you guys, the listeners in the comments, talking about, like a Freddie Peralta, like a Mackenzie Gore. A Leody DeVries type prospect could net you one of those players, but you gave that up for a reliever. Now, if he ends up being converted to a starter, which I think is more likely than is being reported, in my opinion, then the trade makes a lot more sense. In which Preller said, no problem, I'll find a new prospect, but I don't care if it's a reliever. I'm getting a dynamic reliever that can help us for a playoff push right now, since they were looking to be a playoff team. And it very much that was expected, especially at the deadline. The Padres definitely looked like they were going to be a playoff team, right? So he does all that on top of the trades we talked about before. And then he says, cool. And then not on top of that, we have the possibility of turning him into a starter. If that happens, and if he is a starter and the team's top three is, Nick Pivetta, Joe Musgrove, Mason Miller, then the degree to which they have to finesse this offseason becomes a lot less important, right? They don't have to finesse their way and hope that they could sign multiple pitchers or that they have to trade Jake Cronenworth in order to get a pitcher, right? Because you have Mason Miller potentially converting to a starter. And while I do agree with the if it ain't broke, don't fix it, this is definitely a team that has shown, along with many other teams in Major League Baseball, an ability to turn relief pitchers into starters. There's even rumors that Luke Weaver might turn into a starter. We saw Clay Holmes last year. We saw the Padres do it with Seth Lugo, and then the Kansas City Royals seized upon that and turned him into a near Cy Young candidate back in 2024, right? So I would be super, super in favor. I understand some people saying if it ain't broke, don't fix it, but I think it's all going to depend on how free agency goes. It is the biggest question. If the Padres can go out and do another Nick Pivetta type signing, let's say they do some creative contract and they get Lucas Giolito, then that changes things and you might see him in the bullpen. If not, then I would be a little bit surprised if they just traded a top level prospect like that on top of the other prospects that they had to give up for a reliever, right? A guy who can only go one inning every now and then too, or at least a little bit more than two, right? Don't get me wrong. He's an amazing, amazing reliever. I have no doubt about that. But given the volatility of relievers in the past and given the in general, what's more important, right? You can find good relievers at the deadline, guys. Right? Every deadline, every year, you can find guys that are having decent years, give up barely a prospect for them and call it a day. I understand he's under your control for a while and he looks like he's super talented, but that is my criticism, is did you use Leota DeVries's value properly, considering the Jake Cronenworth trade possibility and considering the starting pitching rotation needs? We'll have to see. That's why free agency is going to be very, very interesting, depending on what type of pitcher they are able to bring in to make up for the absence of Dylan Cease and our boy Michael King. And I will say, for all the haters and all the people talking about Dylan Cease, you lost Dylan Cease and Michael King, you're screwed and blah, 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 blah. I will say that there's a couple things with that. Number one, with this team, I think that it's important to note that they barely had Michael King a lot this year, and Dylan Cease was bad this year, and they still won 90 games, right? So it's not impossible that they go out and still have a pretty good year from their starting pitching, or at least get enough from their starting pitching. With Jason Adam hopefully coming back, with the Demons already in the bullpen, and Mason Miller, that's okay, right? But let's talk about some of the other parts of the trade deadline. The last pieces, Nestor Cortes and JP Sears, right? And look, here's the thing. These guys, there's not much that I have to talk about too much, right, with these two. But what they gave up for Nestor Cortes and JP Sears, right, like it's fine. But JP Sears was not very good for the Padres. It was unfortunate. I think that people were hoping he could be, both of these guys, both him and Cortes, could be what they got out of Martin Perez last year, where he was a guy that could fill in innings and be okay. Instead, he wasn't. 5.47 ERA with the Padres, somehow was worse with the Padres than with the A's. He had a FIP of 6.18, right? Like, he was really, really bad. And then you have Nestor Cortes, who really annoyed me. really, really annoyed me that Nestor Cortes just came in. He pitched to a 5.47 ERA. I understand he was just coming back, but he was really, really bad. And the Dodgers start, especially, he was not fair, or not the Dodgers start. I forgot what it was, D-backs maybe, in which he gets ejected. He was just really bad. Those pitchers did not work out, right? So this is, again, it's a little bit harder to find starting pitching than it is to find relief pitching, which is the theme, I think, of today's episode and my potential criticism of the Mason Miller deal. And then, in terms of bad, the last bad thing could be what they gave up for Freddie Fermin. Take into account everything I just said, right? They also gave up Stephen Kolek and Ryan Berger. I don't necessarily mind those two players getting traded in a vacuum. However, would you feel better potentially about this team having some more ammunition and some more possibilities for the rotation if they had Stephen Kolek and Ryan Berger? Berger, I think the fastball plays a decent amount. I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but Stephen Kolek, I do think that the talent is a little bit better, and that's why you saw him perform so much better with the Royals, right? Like, he had a really, really good stretch with them after being traded with the Padres. 1.91 ERA, 2.71 FIP. He didn't get a lot of strikeouts. That's not his thing. 21 strikeouts in 33 innings. But what he does do is produce ground balls, and that is something that is a lot more sustainable than some of the other guys that the Padres may be using, right? Randy Vasquez. I know Randy Vasquez pitched to a 3 ERA, but he gave up, he put a lot of balls into the air. He did not put any balls on the ground, and he was basically relying on just batters not making the best contact. Is that going to happen again? I don't necessarily think so, despite the fact that I do think he made some good strides. So That's the trade deadline in retrospect. Did they gamble too much on 2025? I think largely depends on what they do in free agency in terms of starting pitching. If they are able to bring in Giolito, and if Mason Miller is turned into a good starter, then I don't think it's as bad. But if not, oh boy, it's going to be a problem, guys. It's going to be a problem. I hope that it doesn't kill them too much, right? And honestly, we never know, right? Like, this is still what's his face? This is still a team that has showed year after year an ability to procure prospects because AJ Preller is a beast. I'm hearing a lot about Tucker Musgrove, who we're going to talk about with Aram next year, but I'm sorry, we're going to talk about Aram for next year, and we're going to talk about that on tomorrow's episode. But guys, that doesn't mean we're done. All right, we did the trade deadline retrospective, but there's still some questions that you guys sent in that I want to talk about because they're really fun, and I love responding to trolls and good faith listeners all the same. But first, just 1 second to talk to you about NFL Sundays, which move really fast. One big play, and suddenly everything feels different. And that's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. Every drive, every momentum shift, every highlight moment, whatever it is. You're watching the Jets and the Falcons. You're watching AD Mitchell going absolutely nuts, right? Making that basket catch. You're like, oh my God, the Jets are going to win a game, whatever, right? And let me tell you, it's even more fun with live betting when it starts to shift, when the momentum is changing. Live spreads and money lines adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals, and more. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL bets, live bets, all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. And just like that, everybody, we are back here on the Locked On Padres podcast, thriving and vibing despite it all. And also, let me tell you, things are good, man. I hope everyone's enjoying the holiday festivities because it has been a very nice holiday festivity stretch. I'm telling you, murder is row, man. Once you get to Halloween, oh man, Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, for all those who celebrate, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. And for those who don't you like the Christmas vibe? Don't you like the snowy winter wonderland? It's great. We love it very much. But let's talk about some of your guys' remaining mailbag comments and questions. I mentioned this one yesterday, but I didn't finish it. Silas Robert Shaw brought up his distaste for Dylan Cease being inconsistent. I don't think it's going to be too much with him. But I also wanted to respond to at Bill J's 1947 saying, wow, kind of dumb of the Padres not to trade a crappy pitcher like Cease to get some value out of him at the deadline. Dumb. I've seen a couple Padres fans make this comment. He was rumored to be traded all year. And I, if you listen to my podcast, told you that was not going to happen. And my response to people saying it was dumb that if you knew you were going to lose him, why didn't you trade him? It's because the Padres were likely going to be a playoff team. They needed people to get them through the season, especially after they had to give up, right? Stephen Kolek and Ryan Berger in order to acquire a catcher that they desperately needed because their catching was so bad in Freddie Fermin, right? Hopefully Freddie Fermin could be great next year. And I think that, and we're also going to save some more Freddie Fermin talk for next week, by the way, because I want to talk about catching options and a potential trade for a player that nobody has probably thought of. Well, some of you have thought of, but you get my point. Wait till next week. The reason they didn't trade Dylan Cease is because Dylan Cease was having a really bad year. And teams don't like trading assets for a guy who's going to be a rental who's also having a bad year. And you're basically betting on the talent and all that stuff kicking back in. And if it doesn't kick in, then you gave up assets for a guy who's not going to help you in the playoffs potentially, because that's the type of team that would be trading for Dylan Cease for a rental, a playoff contender team, right? So you probably weren't going to get too much because he was having such a bad season. So why not just hang on to him? And then you would potentially use him in the wild card round, which they didn't. He did quite well, or in the divisional series, which they didn't make it to. But that's basically why it didn't make sense. What? I'm going to get the team's 27th best prospect? No, you keep Dylan Cease in that case. If Cease was having a great year and the Padres weren't doing well, then it might have been more dumb to trade him, a la Josh Hader back in 2023. I think that was a trade that actually should have been made, especially because he's a reliever. Teams could use a reliever, and you might have gotten a decent piece in exchange for a guy who ended up having moments where he didn't even want to pitch for the team, right? That was the whole thing. So that's why they didn't trade Dylan Cease, and I don't think that it was dumb not to. I really don't. What's it called? Silas Robert Shaw also says, for Manny Machado, he's going to the Hall of Fame, no question. I guess Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, or Clayton Kershaw, if we're going by the ring sort of thing. While Barry has other issues than poor postseason performance, both he and Kershaw were not good outside the regular season. Manny's going to finish over 500 home runs and 70 wins above replacement. How many players not tainted by steroids have that and aren't in the Hall of Fame? Not many. Yeah, really, like truly, there aren't many, right? Like Albert Pujols is one, but that's it. Right, crazy stuff. But speaking of dumb comments from Dodgers fans, at Edward Camarena commented, oh wait, no, I already responded to this one. I forgot to delete this one. My bad. Moving up though. At Jose Ayala's 2730, in response to me saying that Manny Machado is probably a Hall of Famer and him saying you're ridiculous, he's never accomplished anything, I said, well, playoff success in baseball tends to not be as much of an indicator of Hall of Fame status as the other sports, for better or worse, right? There are just guys that I think the Hall of Fame voters, especially new age voters, acknowledge the same way new age voters acknowledge that if a pitcher doesn't have a lot of wins, right, that it might be the product of the team around them. That's kind of the same thing with baseball. But Ayala, of course, decides to look a little bit more dumb in his next comment. He says, in response to me saying, well, then Mike Trout must not be a Hall of Famer because he hasn't accomplished anything. He said, you can't compare Trout with Machado. Look at the stats. If that was the case, then Muncy deserves a first ballot as well. He also has multiple 30-plus home run seasons. Only one little difference. He's won, right? So I love that. He says, I have to look at the stats. Well, I did just that. Max Muncy, in terms of his career, has 22.6 wins above replacement. Manny Machado has, let's see here, 57.3. Right? On top of being a really good defensive player throughout his career, on top of being a guy who's been basically 30 home runs since 2015, right? This is a bad faith argument, right? I like Max Muncy. I think he's a very, very good player. But this is a guy who at best has produced 4 wins above replacement. This past year, you know what he put up? 2.9 wins above replacement. And in terms of, well, Muncy's hit 30 home runs. Yeah, he's done it 3 times. Or I'm sorry, he's actually done it 4 times. Huh, I'm impressed. I forgot about the 2018 year with the Dodgers that he was really good. I forgot about that. How about that? Huh. And 23 as well. I forgot about that. When he hit 212, yeah, he hit 212, but he was hitting the crap out of the ball. He's like mini Kyle Schwarber. But anyway, so yeah, this is just a bad faith argument. And I think that it is, you can't use awards and all that sort of stuff to slander Manny, but then not care that Mike Trout hasn't been to the playoffs in literally since I was in high school, right? And guess what? They're both going to be Hall of Famers. Machado, not as much of a slam dunk. We have to see a little bit more how the rest pans out. But at his age, he's going to keep hitting home runs. He's going to keep being solid. He's literally always been there. He plays games all the time. And unlike Max Muncy, he has 4 top 5 MVP finishes, including one year in 2022, when I think he actually should have won it. It was like the one year that Major League Baseball and its writers didn't care about wins above replacement, which they love using, or usually is one of the indicators for these things. And in 2022, they were just like, don't care. It's never been discussed, right? It's never been discussed. But the 3 war leaders that year were Aaron Judge, Nolan Arenado, Manny Machado, Jose Altuve, Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt ends up winning. I just don't get it, especially like, just not to get on my soapbox too much, but one thing for me, and one of the things I brought up, I don't know how you can be the MVP when the other nominee is your teammate. This is just a me thing. I understand the thinking, and there are some exceptions, right? Like say Shohei Ohtani, when he's putting up 11 wins above replacement as a pitcher and hitter, I don't mind that. Aaron Judge, 10 wins above replacement, even with Soto, but even still, I'm always going to have a problem with that. How are you the most valuable if someone else was very extraordinarily valuable to right on your team, was a league leader? That's just me, though. That's just me. And in a premium position, I think Machado should have won the MVP that year, especially given the fact that Tatis suspension, they didn't really get to spend in free agency. They didn't really get to add any offense. Like, you knew he had to have a big year. Not as much, in my opinion, compared to the Cardinals, as evidenced by the fact that Arenado was incredible that year, too. But again, that could be my bias talking. So overall, the comparison of these two players is absurd. I think Max Muncy can be awesome in certain instances. I really do. I think that Max Muncy is a player that is often really, really underrated and an example of when the Dodgers really are building instead of just signing a bunch of guys. But all in all, I just think that this is an absurd idea, right? It's really absurd to be like Max Muncy's in the Hall of Fame because he's had better postseason success, but we have to ignore like 8 more great seasons that Manny Machado's had over him. I understand that nobody's having this debate except me for content's sake and responding to very dumb Dodgers fans, but I wanted to do that to hopefully cheer up some good Padres listeners that are paying attention to this episode. let's see here. What should I? Oh yeah, one last thing from the Blue Jays fans on Dylan Cease saying, Blue Jays fan here, and I have my doubts about my team signing Cease. There's a lot of potential, but 210 million over 7 years for potential seems like a lot for a guy that has been inconsistent, walked a lot of batters, has high pitch counts early. I keep getting told excuses by my friends who are Jays fans that the Padres defense is terrible, hence his ERA above 4. However, to that I say Nick Pivetta managed a 2.87 ERA with a 13-5 record with the Padres last year. He's never had an ERA below 4 with any team. It's a great point. It's a great point. And a lot of people are killing the Padres. A lot of people are killing the Jays to a degree. And I think he could have a great season. I really do. His upside is there. But again, I think that a big part of this contract was the consistent innings that he's going to give you and the consistent strikeout rate that he's going to give you. Teams are just going to pay big bucks for that because there's very few players like that. There's only like 3 or 4 starting pitchers that have pitched more innings than Dylan Cease since 2021. Seriously. Like that's a real thing. So overall, Jays fans, I'd be a little bit worried. You better hope that you have some other good starting pitchers around him. But I do respect that they also went out and get that Muncy fellow, right? I respect that they're at least trying, which you can't say the same for everybody other team in baseball. But ladies and gentlemen, that about brings this episode to an end. Today's episode of the Locked On Padres podcast, the only pod that may be better than the Padres themselves. Remember, subscribe to the pod wherever you get your podcasts from. Send a comment in the comment section below to be answered on Monday. We've got some leftover mailbag things, including a take on my really dumb take that runners at scoring position thing can be a little bit lucky. We're going to talk about that and what I meant by that next week, as well as catching breakdowns. We're going to be talking about some pitchers that I think the Padres should go after, right? We're going to be talking about some hitters, including some real bargain bin ones that we should be talking about, the whole catcher situation and a whole lot more. But tomorrow is Prospect Talk with my good buddy Aram. It's going to be a lot of fun on Fun Friday. But until next time, stay safe and, of course, stay faithful. My Friar Faithful homies, take care.